In some respects, if you're a creative artist, you are thrown into a deep pool, at the deep end. I mean, there's an element of survival.
They started out with idols. You know, in the case of Sibelius, it was Tchaikovsky. And then he found more and more his own voice. And Thomas Adès, in a way, is really a child of our time, where there are so many influences. But he takes that and makes it his own.
It's a way of making sense of these things for myself by putting them next to each other in various ways. And then, in the end, you end up with the result of that.
We need enigmas. Human beings have that desire to explain everything, but how do you explain love? When something brings tears to your eyes when you listen to a certain passage, you don't know why, but it's there. Music is able to touch on the big, big questions, but doesn't give definite answers. That's what makes it so seductive.
My mother is an art historian specializing in Dada and Surrealism. So I did grow up in the house, which was literally full of surrealist art, objects, books. And that was a normal environment for me, actually. I suppose when I did encounter the Buñuel films from a season on the BBC, I watched quite a lot of them. I know it was when I was 13 because I checked this. I suppose the comic side of it appealed to me as well, the absurd side, and you could tell that there really didn't have any rules. Anything could happen. So it had that anarchy to it, really, that sense of potential anarchy. Very contained, but it's there. Almost like a sort of some Python-esque world sometimes. The Exterminating Angel is based on a film, El Ángel Exterminador, by Buñuel, a 1960 surrealist film, which is a very lavish dinner party. At the end of the party, some unseen force, the Exterminating Angel, has prevented them from leaving. It gets narrower. First of all, they're in the house, then they're in one room, and that's it. That's the story. It's never explained what the force is. Days turn into weeks, and then we lose track of time. And they start to hallucinate in a way. And there are certain elements that are classically surreal. For example, there are sheep in the house from the start, and a bear. Actually, these are, in fact, details that Buñuel took from real-life high society parties in Madrid at a certain time, but he's turned them into these disquieting, almost omens of that reality is, in some ways, breaking down before our eyes. There's something about it that just felt that it could be an opera. So I took this film and turned it into a three-act opera with Tom Cairns, who directed, and we made the libretto together. Well, in some ways, it was the very lack of music in the film that inspired me, because I could fill in the silences and fill in the gaps. The dialogue is not really entirely realistic. It's very strange. But when you start to look at what is actually happening and what they're saying, it's all very funny, because everything is ironic. They come up with excuses to sort of explain as if they'd made a decision to stay, it's as if it was up to them. People say things like, well, what am I going to do in the street at this hour of the morning? and they think that they're being reasonable, but when you set it to music, it becomes funnier or more emotional, more poignant. That was done in Salzburg, in New York, and in London, Copenhagen. And then during the lockdown, 2020, I made it a symphony of 4 movements drawn from the opera. The first movement is called Entrances, and it's when the characters enter into the house and greet each other, and they come in twice in a surreal way, and then they go in and they go to sleep after dinner, which is the sign that something is not as it should be. And the second movement is a military-style march, which points to the collapse of society at the end of the opera. The martial law is imposed. The third movement is a slow movement. And it's a young couple who are engaged to be married, and they basically disappear into a cupboard, lock themselves in, and they're somehow end their lives in there. We don't know how. And this is the sort of Liebestod. This is their song that they sing together. And the final movement is all the waltzes in the opera sewn up together into one big waltz. In this symphony, I was able to allow the musical directions to kind of reach more of the goal that they were aiming for. So that I think it was something to... And it also extends to the orchestration, which in the opera there are many undercurrents and things kind of go underground and then come up again, and that's just because of the action, because of the dialogue. In this version, I could bring more things into the light of day, which are a little hidden or buried in the opera. It was done during 2020, when suddenly one had much more time at home, unplanned. One of the things, some people would finally fix the broken cupboard in the kitchen, or in my case, I went back and picked up my orchestra score and made a symphony out of it.